Hello and welcome to another episode of Transformational Blueprints, where we try to put a dent in the large number of transformation programs that fail. Hosted by me, Mario Michaels, founder and director of Synaxia Group. On this series, we will bring you unique insights drawn from first-hand experience from some of the most high-profile architecture and transformation leaders across the globe. Topics told in order to share knowledge, experiences and ideas to inspire, innovate and give back to the architecture community. So grab a coffee, sit back and relax. Good morning everyone. Today we'll be talking to Phil Williams about setting the stall out early in architecture. With a career in large-scale tech transformations since 1995, Phil has contributed to major financial technology initiatives. He's consulted for organisations like RBSG, Barclays, Lloyds, Nationwide, Aviva, the payments regulator and Quilter PLC. As the lead architect for the open banking in 2017, Phil helped deliver the first UK open banking standard. He also served as chief architect at Enterprise Blueprints, developing core practices in cloud, data, cybersecurity and enterprise architecture. In his spare time, additionally, Phil is contributing author to the ISA Global IT Architecture Body of Knowledge. Phil, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Mario.
I always start with just a little bit of background about yourself, Phil.
Yeah, sure. So, Phil Williams, I kind of fell into technology projects after I left university in 1994, 5, something like that. I'd been at university in Sheffield doing an electronics engineering degree, and some computer science stuff was just starting to emerge then in terms of using computers to do engineering stuff, and it was all green screen and the internet was just emerging and everything had to be done in kind of terminal based language. But I sort of picked up a job at Norwich Union down the road in Sheffield, and they saw I'd done something with computers and they threw me straight into the management information department, which today we'd probably call data, BI, that kind of thing. So it was all about interpreting big mainframe databases to get information to support a regulation in the pensions industry. So, and from there, I kind of moved through the ranks, through different companies on different technologies, often sort of spearheading teams or spearheading difficult problems, because my nature was I wasn't one of those people who was afraid to get stuck in and try something a little bit new, which I know we probably take for granted nowadays, that iterative approach, but that's the way I worked. I kind of always said, let's take this project on, let's find out what he's doing. And over the years, I'd been working a lot on major projects and transformation, and that started to emerge into what we now call architecture solution design. So I guess when I started, there weren't many architects. You know, an architect was someone who drew pictures of buildings, things like that.
Yeah.
It wasn't a common terminology. I think some big companies like IBM were messing around with the phrase a little bit more. And TOGAF was obviously around. So it was starting to emerge, but it was very early days when I started in my career. So I've been developer, systems manager, consultant, technical analyst. That's the route I took to being, chief architect today.
Very good. And what was your scope at Enterprise Blueprints? And for those that sort of don't know Enterprise Blueprints, I'm sure many will, but just if you could give us a bit of background on them as an organisation and what your scope was there.
Yeah, I mean, they're the UK's leading boutique architecture firm, and they were a small startup guy, a guy called Prakash, back in, I think it was 2010, something like that. And he was heavily involved in the Lloyds integration. But the thing I liked about EB, they always kept architecture as their focus. They're a very narrow organisation in terms of we just do architecture and we do it really, really well. And they kind of emerged at a time when architecture was starting to really become a thing, and people were appreciating they needed architecture to run large transformational projects, things like the Lloyds HBOS transformation, digital transformations emerging. So I joined them in 2017 as a contractor, because I was mostly self-employed for many years. and did a couple of years for them. And they said, "Hey, look, we're a small company. You've got a diverse experience and skill set. Do you want to come on board and focus on building our payments practice," as it was at the time, because I'd been working heavily in payments regulator and UK open banking. So I kind of hit the ground on a piece of work with them for a payments transformation and help them with that. As time went on, I just got involved in different areas because my experience of leading teams, my experience of understanding transformations and some of the softer skills needed in those areas, I could translate that into supporting EB grow, and that's what I did. Last couple of years at EB, I helped them develop out some core practice areas. So we decided to start to build a more solid structure. They integrated with Bain, and they had a bit more support there to spend some time to build out the future of the company. So my role is to look after the practices, and start to bring them into the marketplace. So that was cybersecurity, data, enterprise architecture, cloud. Those were our core practices that we started to develop a service offering off the back of. But it's been an interesting journey because I think I've been involved in about 50 to 60 different clients at my time at EB. Some of them I'd be dedicated working with. Some of them I'd just be dropping into support of the teams because it's a particular area where they needed my new skill set. So a great journey. So EB's going strong in the industry. I think our focus on working with Bain is to really strengthen what they had as an emerging company and build that going forward.
Okay. What do you think makes a great architect in today's world then?
Yeah, and that's a really interesting question, and it's kind of got lots of answers to it depending on what you see as architecture, because I don't think we've really truly defined architecture. We've defined it in the context of different companies, and this is where IASA are coming in to try and go, this is what architecture means, this is what professional architect should look like. But it's still kind of under debate a little bit. I think that comes from the way we're moving now in the way we deliver projects. Organizations and large transformation, we've kind of gone from this very structured waterfall, TOGAF orientated V model. Let's deliver software as packages and launch it on a bank holiday weekend, so we have an extra day in case stuff goes wrong. And we spend 5 years for this one weekend to deliver something, and that's always traditionally how projects used to be done. Big migration, because you had big ERP systems. The technology's moved us to a place where there's a lot more integration now. You can connect anything to anything in different ways. There's thousands of SaaS products on the market which can do anything, any problem you throw out there. You can find a product somebody's written to do it. You've got open source stuff coming along. So it's become a lot more of a mosh pit of stuff that it's learning how to put it together to give you those things. And we get a more distributed architecture off the back of that. But you also get things like time to market improvement. So we've now got to a position where the people who have the money tend to go, okay, this company is doing that in 6 weeks. It takes us 6 months to do that. Why can't we do it like that? And they're wanting to move to a more agile approach in terms of the way they approach their technology transformation. And what that brings is that you have to look at design and architecture in a different way. You can't have this abstract set of lines and boxes where everything gets neatly into, because that's not the way the world works anymore. It's very distributed. So you have to really focus on the things you want to do and narrowly focus and deliver those things and incrementally experiment and learn how you can make them better. And that seems to be the way transformation is working, with a lot of different skill sets. You're still doing analysis, you're still doing design, you're still doing testing. All that stuff's the same. We've just compressed it into faster, more efficient, quicker ways of doing it. So what does that mean for the architect? Previously, the architect would maybe have come along and said, I'm going to draw this capability model. This is what we need to move to hit this business goal. and this will be at the enterprise level.
Yep.
You've seen it, one of those diagrams with lots of boxes on, with words in, and they create the definition for what those words mean. What's the people, process, and technology in each of those boxes, and then we go and try and ask a transformation program to deliver it, which is traditionally how we would have done things when we had one system that would cover that people, process, technology. Now you're kind of going, okay, we've got a multifaceted world of stuff that we can put together in different ways, and things don't fit neatly in boxes anymore. Skills don't fit neatly, products don't fit neatly. So how do we address this? Well, we have to look at a more product service approach.
Yep.
What are the outcomes we need to achieve? What is good enough to guide a delivery team to hit the mark first time? So how can and we've got to think about architecture in the concept of the value of why it's there. Right?
Yeah.
It's not there to it's not there for the architect. It's there to cross a bridge to guide the rest of the stuff to deliver what's needed. So it's there to go, here's the objective, here's the outcomes we want, here's the things we need to do and the things we need to build, the way we need to put them together to achieve that. Then it's over to you, rest of your team, to actually deliver that. And sometimes we forget as architects that we've got a whole bunch of other people who need to read our work and understand what it means to them. And that's not necessarily a 50-page Word document that's signed off in triplicate. That can be a workshop, it can be a diagram, it can be a discussion. There's loads of ways of doing it. And I think that's where a good architect today can pull on all the different tools and all different approaches that he needs to communicate effectively to a delivery team what needs to be done, in what order, what are the risks, what are the things they can play around with a bit, so where are the guardrails, and support that team deliver an amazing product or service. That's the difference where we've moved from technology consulting specialist who knows how everything fits together to be able to describe what they want in the future and guide the team towards delivering that in such a way that it's a successful outcome.
Okay, that makes sense. Your journey to becoming a chief architect's pretty impressive. You previously mentioned that the best architects aren't necessarily those that start out as solution architects. What qualities or experiences do you believe have a crucial sort of impact in your rise to your role as chief architect? And what should aspiring chief architects focus on when it comes to their career path if they want to get to that level?
I think it's somewhat dependent on your personal journey and where you want to work. If you want to stay in the same company for the next 50 years or whatever, then you need to understand what a chief architect means to them. Because it might actually be more of a management and resourcing role.
Okay.
They look after a team of 200 architects across the globe, and they have to figure out how they utilize those architects, where they deploy them, have they got the right skills in the bag. That's more a management approach, and I think that's not traditionally where an architect mindset would fit. That's more program management, project, operational lead type approach. So it depends on the name you're attaching to it. But if I think of what a good chief architect looks like, I think there's nothing to say people from a development community, which most architects, solution architects, and senior solution architects come from. They start as a developer. They might do some testing. They move through the journey, and then they've developed stuff well enough that they can qualify as I now can design what I'm developing. Scratch from a bit of paper, and they move up the ranks that way. And that's great for domain architecture. So if you've got a very specific kind of chief data architect, you've got a cloud COV, things like that, they tend to become really strong in one particular vertical. What they do. So they're a really good domain architect, understands everything that's going on in the industry, all the latest bells and whistles, and have been through the mill. But that's still quite siloed and isolated. in terms of the role of a chief architect, who
Yeah.
may have to make sure that all the different domains are stitched together
Mm-hmm.
in a way that works for the business.
Yeah.
So, and the way that works for the business is important. You've got to understand the business strategy. You've got to understand, what's this business here for? What's the value? What's it trying to achieve? And this is where you have to start thinking about the boring stuff, like, this is an amazing, interesting thing I really want to do, like machine learning or AI or something like that, generative AI. I really want to do that. It's so exciting. It's great, cutting edge. You've got to ask yourself the question, what's the value?
Yeah.
What's your return on investment for architecting this amazing thing? And if you go back to building architects, people building, you get one or two people building the Eiffel Tower and all these amazing structures that are sustainable for a long time. But the people who put the money up front, they're looking for return on investment. They're looking for, and that's not just financial. That could be customer satisfaction.
Yeah.
It could be de-risk. It could be regulation. But there's some return on investment needed from the build of that architecture. And when you start to understand that, then you start to go, okay, I now understand the value chain.
Yeah.
The thing I'm designing, to the thing it has to give back. That's a really important balance. And that only comes from soft skills of delivering in projects, dealing with senior stakeholders, understanding biases of individuals, where they come from, what's their interest. There's a lot of soft skills stuff which helps contribute into that frame of the architect to make some really well informed decisions when they're thinking about how it's going to be perceived.
Understanding why are you doing anything? Why are you doing that transformation program? Why are you implementing that piece of software? Or what's the actual, as you say, coming back to the value that it brings, but understanding what value do you want it to bring and working backwards, isn't it? And you would have hired a load of architects in your time. Have you had any really good examples of where you've picked people from either outside of traditional IT roles or maybe within the technology department, but in, outside of software engineering or whatever the traditional route is, that, has given them an edge because they've got specific skills? I don't know, that's individual, by the way. Everybody's completely different. But as a generalist, they're people from product, for example, that you think, they're really good at requirements gathering or understanding how everything fits together kind of thing. Have you got any good examples of where that's worked really, really well?
I think traditionally you get multiple skill sets in the architecture domain. Whichever way you look at it, the architect needs to be able to talk to people. He needs to be able to communicate effectively. The more effective a communicator they are, the more value you get out of them, because they're clearly understanding what they need, what they want, and how to get it. And I find a lot of business analysts have that skill set. Because they're used to requirements gathering. I mean, you have to draw the line at business analysts kind of going, I'm now going to design this enterprise distributed cloud framework. Because they have the skills to do that. There's nothing to say they don't have the skills to learn how to do it.
The potential to be able to do it.
And I think that's really important, because they come, you've almost got the development architect who comes from a development. It's like a pyramid, right? The development architects come from here and they go, I can develop all this stuff, but I don't know how to communicate it. I don't know how to ask the right questions, and I don't know who my target audience is. And almost the opposite side of the coin, you've got the BAs who kind of go, I know how to talk about this and communicate this and understand it, but I don't know how to actually do it. So both are in equal measure useful skills in an architecture context. I think there's one thing slightly different about an architect. An architect tends to get more challenge than an analyst role, because an analyst gathering requirements is going, I'm going to help you understand how to do this. An architect role has to push back. They have to go, actually, you can't do that because you're implementing a load of technical debt, and they can get quite unpopular quite quickly.
And another skill an architect needs to have, and I think this is where it is quite a common downfall for a lot of architects I speak to, is the ability to sell something, whether that's selling a particular product or particular technology, or even selling architecture as a practice, because we all know the identity crisis architecture is going through at the moment, whether that's enterprise or solutions level. An engineer can do a solutions architect job and so on and so forth. So, having the ability to sell is a massive, massive skill. How does one develop that skill? And you would have seen this coming from consultancy background, because that's even more important in that industry. So how can someone who's maybe not akin to wanting to sell, or turns their nose up at sales, in inverted commas, how can someone develop that skill? Because it's absolutely crucial for the job.
I think you're spot on. It's really critical to understand how to sell the value of architecture, and in different forms. As you say, it might be an architecture community, or it might be a particular architect product. It's difficult, and I think one of the skills you learn very quickly is coming from solution architect. Presenting complex diagrams to people you're trying to sell to is a big no-no.
Yeah.
By all means, have them in the appendices, have them in small slides in your presentation to demonstrate you've got the credibility to do that.
Yeah.
But you're not trying to describe the solution to the person you're selling to. You're trying to describe the outcome. You're trying to describe what the solution will give them. But you're also trying to persuade them you're the man to give them that solution.
Yeah.
You need to back it with the content. I think from a sales perspective, a lot of architects come in at an angle where they go, the stakeholder I'm dealing with understands this even better than I do.
Yeah.
Because they're talking to a more senior leader, so they naturally think, they're here to test me. They really know this stuff better than I do, and I've got to prove to them I know it. And that's not what it's about. It's about coming in and going, this is what we're trying to achieve. This is my reasons why. Here's the value it will bring you.
Yeah.
This is the reason why we're the best people to do it, because we've got credibility behind us. And I think it's a different mindset. It's a mindset of accountability.
Yeah.
Well, you've got to go in with a mindset of, I'm not coming in to ask you for your permission.
Yeah.
I'm coming in to tell you, I genuinely believe you need to do this.
Yeah.
I genuinely believe this is going to give you value, and I'm going to explain why. Take it or leave it. Not, I'm trying to sell you something because I've got targets to meet.
Yeah.
It's a different mindset, because an architect tends to believe, it's like his baby when he builds something. So he tends to believe in what he's doing. So that the sales, the authenticity of the sales comes from the belief in what they're doing. I find a lot of architects undersell themselves, because they kind of come in and go, there's a big imposter syndrome flying around about technology's moving so fast, there's so many different facets. It's very hard to go, have I covered everything? But you don't know till you ask, and sometimes you have to fail to succeed. So understanding the value and communicating that, absolutely key.
Now, setting up an architecture practice has to align to the operating model of the business, right? So when designing an operating model for an architecture practice, how do you align the structure to the business needs? How do you decide what kind of architecture practice structure works best for the organization? Again, you would have seen or done this firsthand.
Yeah, and I put this down to I think an easy way to think about this is the scale of the organization and the scale of the remit. There's a very different, and I've worked in both. I worked in a startup that developed an app, a health app, now on the App Store. We were a team of 5. I was the lead architect. I was also the only architect.
Classic.
So I had developers, database, DBAs, UI, UX people, nobody architected. And I had to architect the whole thing myself. So I had to dive deep in order to do that. So small startup, you've got to be able to know where to go, how to learn. You're not going to be afraid to get your hands dirty, because otherwise you're just not going to get anywhere. Right? You're adding no value if you're telling people what to do. You have to develop proof of concept yourself, play around with things, and get a bit techy. And that tends to be Scrum team type approach. You'd probably do that if you're an architect
Yeah.
in a full-time Scrum team, Skunk Works, that kind of thing. As you get to the larger organizations, it depends on the remit you've got as architecture. And I think that's a really interesting question, because are you architecting the enterprise? Are you architecting just the tech? Are you architecting the data? You know, what is your remit? And you've got an emerging list of, so you've got CIO, CTO, CDO, CISO. You know, these are all different accountabilities within an organization to look after security, to look after data, to look after information, to look after technology. They all need architecting. So architecture sits across all of them. And you don't traditionally have a chief technology architect, a chief, you know, you kind of have a chief architect sitting under a CTO.
Yeah.
And then you start to go, okay, well, where's his house? Where's the dotted line to chief information security officer? Where's the dotted line to chief data officer? You know, a lot of some chief architects sit in the COO, operationally focused. So I think you've really got to think carefully about what you're looking for architecture to bring. Are you looking for assurance and risk? You know, or are you looking for information, innovation? So from an assurance perspective, am I having an architect because I want to ratify my designs are okay and give me that assurance as a company that all my designs are fit for purpose? Or am I architecting something because I want to be first to market? I want to innovate. I want to build something new. Or am I architecting because AI has just come out and I want to do something with it? You know, there's all these different angles. I think you've really got to understand what you want to use architecture for. And saying that, there's a bunch of stuff you'll never get away from. You'll never get away from being able to architect your infrastructure properly. Whether that be cloud-based or on premises, it needs doing it properly. Data needs looking after properly. So there are certain domains where you're going to have that level of expertise to construct that in the right way, and there needs to be an interconnectivity there. So I think the operating model for a good architecture function is up for grabs at the moment. And I see it that at the moment you kind of have enterprise architecture. Previously, you had enterprise architecture a little bit ivory tower, strategic, roadmap based. And that's great for making sure we know when the next SAP release is coming out, or when we have to move off this IBM machine to something else. You know, that's fantastic for that type of stuff, because you've got it. You know, it's a translation capability direct from the supplier into the organization. But then you've got the kind of emerging stuff. How do we deal with that? That's a different skill set again, and that tends to be product-led solution architects coming in, doing things at a very detailed level, and then you've got to match the two together. This is where the enterprise and the solution architect need to talk to each other, and they often come from different. The enterprise architect's looking at a strategic mindset, the solution architect's looking at how can we do this by Tuesday. Difference there, there's a gap there. So joining that up needs to be entwined in the governance of the organization. What's more important to you, the strategy or the delivery? How do you prioritize that? Who prioritizes that? Sort of thing. So
you've literally just touched on it there. You've got governance versus speed effectively. It is the question. And sometimes you've got to dodge the governance to get stuff done quickly. But how do you balance that need for speed with the need to adhere to governance frameworks, as you say, in particular with domains such as data and security and infrastructure, where, you know, they are quite risky if you get it wrong, especially in the early design stages where you're still trying to demonstrate value as an architect or as an architecture practice. So you need to do that quickly. You need to demonstrate quick wins, but then at the same time, there's this whole governance piece, you know, umbrella over you, trying to figure out how that works. How do you do that effectively?
I mean, I've seen an interesting case study recently that I worked on, where an organization had a very strong architecture governance in place, you know, very structured, Everything was done, registered in a tool. All the technical debt was logged. They had expensive teams to manage all that. It was all managed centrally, a very centralized governance. And this particular stakeholder sponsored a transformation project that's going to be agile, forward thinking, product based, move to market. And he was kind of given the mandate by the board to actually do all that outside of governance.
Yep.
And broker that governance with the wider governance, just as a bit of a test framework to see how fast it moved.
Yep.
And in the early days, it ramped up really, really quickly. We were starting to really drive some progress. But then there was a bit of a glitch, and you started to see the broader governance start to come in, even though it was even though it was almost, you can do this without governance.
Yep.
The architecture governance still came. Whichever way you looked at it, it still arrived because it was still needed. People needed to know what was going on. People needed to, it affected the rest of the organization. So governance is important. I think the way you do governance is how you get over that. How do we make it work quickly?
Yeah.
How do we make things work quickly? And I think that comes from clear mandates and charters for individuals, owned by architecture, more distributed, service-led, and more ownership given to the individual areas to deliver something. And then you've got a more centralized, light touch, almost library. So a bunch of architect librarians that just keep all the things moving on the one picture, so everybody understands we're not duplicating. Everyone understands the way things are moving. So I think you've got a bit of the governance at the top needs to be less centralized and lightened considerably, and the accountability needs to be pushed downwards, and the information needs to be pushed downwards. You can't have this CIO making decisions that comes all the way down to the project. The project should make the decisions that go up to the CIO. More so, but, the strategy and the objectives should come down. The information on delivery should flow up. That works a lot better. And if architecture if an operating model can enable that through accountability, you start to get into a good space. But the challenge we've got is a lot of transformational leaders and teams have never had to do accountability before, because they've had this umbrella, this air cover to go, I need this document signed off by these 200 stakeholders, and then I'm confident no one can blame me if it goes wrong. That takes months and years to get there, and by that something's overtaken you. The feasibility's gone. So people have got to start taking accountability, and that only comes from a good set of knowledge, a good set of practices, disciplines to make sure, and not being too fixed on one outcome. You've got to adapt, you've got to change, you've got to pivot. There's no two ways about it. That's essential nowadays.
Okay. There's a big thing at the moment in the market around the differences between business and technology architecture, and a technology architect or solutions architect, or whatever the job title is, should be able to understand the depths of the business, and the business architect should be able to understand the depths of technology. What do you think are the key differences between the two, and how do you ensure both are integrated seamlessly into a digital transformation program?
I think business architecture I don't think it's as well formed as technology architecture in terms of the practices, tools, and approaches. But business architecture has a lot of analysis type tools and techniques to pull on, and a lot of consultancy to pull on. That's effectively what it is. Business architecture tends to be how are we going to architect this particular operating model to face into this market or this organization. I find from a business architecture's perspective, there are some fantastic ideas, but there's a failure in feasibility. So I'll give you an example of that. An organization I worked for decided they were going to go full engineering DevOps capability, and they were going to go all in with that. and create lots of teams that were going
Yep.
to deliver all this fantastic product right up front. As soon as they launched the initiative, they found they could only get about 30% of the workforce that they actually needed out of the 100% they needed, because the workforce, they weren't competitive in the industry. The workforce wasn't there in the
Yep.
geographies they were in. But the whole feasibility just didn't work. They had to go on a different path
Yep.
to actually find what they needed in the market to achieve what they wanted to achieve. And that was a big kind of gotcha moment.
Yeah.
That was an interesting one. But I think from a business architecture perspective, we're somewhat being led by technology nowadays. That's where the
Yep.
value is coming from. So there's no two ways about it. If you're architecting a business, you've got to understand how the technology will enable that, how it will give you optimization, how it will make you efficient, and you've got to understand that angle. And you're building, you're architecting strong DevOps type pipelines. You're architecting strong product teams. The back front middle office kind of starts to, it still exists, and it'll always exist the way it has done. Often through a lot of shadow IT, and a lot of SaaS type products coming in that space now. You've got to connect that operational side of the business heavily with the tech. So you've got to be able to say, how can the tech really innovate and make the jobs of the front office easier, to make the jobs of the middle office easier. They've got to be deep in at they've got to spend time in call centers and find out what's really going on. Because having the grand ideas of how everything fits together at an infrastructure level or a data level, translating that into the guy, the poor guy on the front desk getting hassled because he can't do a change of address on a system or has to swim check. Big difference. We need to bring the two together. So I think a business architect needs to look inwards to the process a lot more. Because now they not get confused with, trying to be the technical architect. Technical architect needs to definitely understand the value they're bringing, the decisions they're making, and the impact on the organization. So if we decide we're going to extend this product for another 3 years instead of moving to a new product, what does that mean? Does that mean we're going to move to a new product somewhere else again because we've got to enable some other project? And therefore, does that mean we're going to end up with duplication? So you've got to understand more than just your little bit. You've got to think about what are the impacts of the architecture I'm putting in place, and what's the trade-off I have to do to kind of go, actually, that bit's going to have to go by the wayside, because if I put that in, it's going to completely, foobar that thing over there. You've really got to have that kind of understanding of the impacts. So value for the technical architect, understand the value of what you're doing and the impact of it. Absolutely critical. For the business architect, understand your process and your operations. That's where you're going to get the benefits. That's where you're going to really gather the savings and the improvements.
Could a BA not just do that? Business analyst?
Yeah, I think to a degree, and is a business architect just a very experienced BA? Could be. Could be in my view. But I think it's more than requirements gathering. It's about reverse engineering. It's about the business architect has to go to the operations and say, this solution I'm putting in place is going to fix that problem.
Right.
So it's the other way around. The business analysts will go to the front office and say, what do you want? I'll write down a list of what you want and go and try and get someone to deliver it, try and make it happen. The guys in the front office don't. The reason they're in the front office is good. They're good at what they do.
Yeah.
If they knew what tools and improvements could be made to make their life better and what's available on the market, they'd be working in a different department. They always know, because they're busy delivering for a customer, keeping the lights on, turning the handle. They haven't got time to do this. This new thing's come out. It's going to make our life better. So somebody needs to do that for them. And for me, that's the business architect.
Okay. You would have seen loads of digital transformations over your time that have worked, that haven't. Can you share some examples of ones that not necessarily have gone wrong, but ones that haven't worked?
Was a large industry transformation that I joined, and they'd been working with a supplier of bespoke building of some technology, and after a 2-year lead time into the project, they had to replace that supplier with another supplier and start again. And for me, that's kind of a failure, right?
Yeah.
You burnt 2 years. That's not a fail fast scenario. Millions of pounds wasted, and that's people's lives, people's jobs, gone to the wall because there was a lack of understanding at the start about what the common goal was, in my opinion. And there was to be fair, it was driven by regulation, and quite often regulation doesn't always make sense to a lot of businesses. Sometimes it can be anti. In fact, I saw somebody the other day was actually creating a role for an anti-regulation person to go in and kind of challenge regulation.
Fantastic.
I think it was in the government or something. So to kind of really challenge and make them think more about how they regulate things. But this was a regulatory thing. And what went wrong? Well, there was a promise made by the supplier it could do something that it couldn't. There wasn't enough due diligence done. And there was a lack of understanding of what the outcomes were going to be. And that was because lack of understanding was because there wasn't enough clarity in what the end game was going to be. You don't need that. This is the interesting thing. You just need to know what's the first step on the journey to creating that clarity, and are we making that together? So, and the way I'll translate this is, if you're working on a piece of work with multiple stakeholders and departments, if you go in and go in 3 years' time, we're going to have improved profitability by 200% because of this, that, or the other, this system. If you start making demands like that, and putting those sort of markers down, it gets a bit of excitement at the board, and it kind of gives the board somebody to take accountability for that. But it's not clear enough. How are you going to do that? And you might not know how you're going to do that. So at the start of the project, you've got to get your stakeholders together. You've got to understand. We might not know what the end game is, but we need to be really clear on what the next step in the journey is. So what does the roadmap look like? And this organization didn't have a roadmap. The supplier had a roadmap.
Yep.
The organization itself had its own roadmap. There wasn't a joint roadmap.
Okay.
And there was a massive difference in expectations between what started to be delivered versus what was actually needed in that space. So getting everyone on the same page, absolutely critical. And they pivoted too late. They pivoted 2 years in. They should have, as soon as those warning signs came up, something was wrong, they needed to pivot straight away. They needed to go, right, okay, let's address this. And they may have got a better outcome. I know that's a bit kind of abstract because I can't say too much about the project.
Yeah, of course.
You've really got to understand that it's not always about going. The architects have to say, okay, we don't know we kind of know what we're trying to achieve, but we don't know how we're going to do it. So let's just focus on this first step together.
Yeah.
And do it together with the stakeholders you need to get success from. And that's how you start the iterative.
You're absolutely right. I think from my experience speaking to leaders, technology leaders, whether that's in architecture or sort of C-suite, one of the most common reasons why they class the transformation program as a failure is because it's not achieved the original objectives. And there's many reasons why that might happen. Prime example, technology's moved on. We now no longer need that because we can do this instead, right? Well, that doesn't necessarily mean it's a failure as a transformation program. It means we've pivoted for the right reasons to get the success we want. So when you say don't necessarily know what the end game is, surely businesses need to try or need to have an outcome of some sort, whether that is, reducing headcount through automation. Now, I'm not saying you need to know exactly how you're going to do that, but that's the vision statement, so to speak. And then architecture then works in an agile way to get to that vision statement through iterative steps on an agile ways of going, right, we've done that, right, okay, now here are our 3 options at this stage. Which one are we going to go for? We're going to go over there. Brilliant, let's go to that one. Is that what you mean?
I think, yeah, that's what I mean. But you've said a couple of things there, which I'd just like to pick up on. The first one is pivoting for the right reasons. I think you said, because what I've seen happen is that organizational leaders who are accountable for certain things will pivot to make it look like it wasn't a failure. So they'll set a scene, they'll write the last page, and then halfway through they'll go, actually, it's not quite working. And I'm paraphrasing here, stereotyping, but it's not quite working. Let's change the last page to be something different, and then we can say we've succeeded.
Right.
If you see what I mean. So it's still kind of not achieved what the original outcome was. I think the second thing is, I'm astounded the amount of people who don't understand what an objective is, even the way they phrase it. So many people, I see so many packs with little tip here for people writing objectives. You can't write, we are going to achieve, we will, or we might. Any of those statements are just, they're not objectives. You need to put yourself at the end of the project and say what you have done. You've got to predict the future and say, right, what do I want to achieve here? Put yourself at the end of the project and make a set of statements about what has been done. That's how you write objectives.
Okay.
They're then timely, they're accurate, they're physical, they're real markers. And then there's a set of hidden objectives. You were saying, reduce our FTE headcount by automation. As a board, I couldn't write that as a mission statement or an objective, because everybody will look for other jobs. So, you're delivering costs. This is where you get fluffy words that the consultants are really good at writing, like delivering 10% cost saving through optimization or rationalization or simplification. Well, what they mean is they're going to fire people and replace them with machines. Well, that's the idea. What they don't actually realize is the people they're firing to replace with machines, they have to hire more expensive people to manage the machines if they haven't done the machines in the right way. They're kind of going, hang on a minute, how did that work? We saved this 10% headcount over here, but we're actually spending more over here. And because they may have done it wrong, they may have been a bit too impulsive and think, there's a reason operations are good at what they do, because they understand all the ins and outs of stuff that's probably not easily translatable into a logical program as such.
Okay.
So I think clear objectives is important at whatever stage, but I think incrementing towards a overall objective is a good thing. And I think that overall objective for companies focused on next year's profit margin, because they have shareholders to pay dividends to. There's an influence there. But then there's the sustainability angle. If you can sustain that product or service for another 100 years, whoever started that journey is the real winner, in my eyes, because they've done the job they're supposed to do, which is create sustainability around the product or service. And that comes from, you can't say what that product or service is going to do in 100 years' time, but you can increment towards what's important right now. And if you can learn to increment quickly through iteration and do fast pivoting, time to market quick, and you can do all those things, you're going to keep building, and you're able to then capitalize on the successes and dampen the failures. And if you can get into that thing where you're going, I've got 10 things on, if any one of these is successful, it's going to be good. It's like a hedge fund, right?
Okay.
The other 9 fail, and that one of them succeeds, we're still in a good space. Let's do all 10. The ones that seem to be working well, we'll
continue
push more funding into.
The
ones that are a bit dodgy, we'll pull back and we'll learn from them. We'll dampen them, but not with an attitude of you've done a failed project, but more an attitude of whatever's failing over there, we're going to take the information from that to make our successes better. So failure is information. Anything that fails gives you some information about why it failed, and you can apply that going forward.
Okay. AI is a big thing at the moment on everybody's lips, and whether most are, or whether the boards are uneducated in it enough to make decisions or whatever. But it links quite nicely into our transformation piece, because it's probably on everybody's agenda, every business's agenda at this point in time. How do they use it? What can they use, etc., etc. But you mentioned something in our previous conversations that's absolutely crucial before anybody even talks about jumping on an AI transformation program. Would you mind telling us and the listeners what that is?
And I think that's understanding what AI is. And I think we've got to appreciate AI has been around for quite a long time. I think what's caused the noise in the past few years is generative AI, um, the ability for AI to be used in its broadest sense with a bigger set of information
Yep.
and almost an open source set of information has generated a lot of opportunity and creativity in the market to do things with. But you've then got to look at use cases where this is going to give you value, right?
Yeah.
So the challenge with AI, I think, is firstly the information you're using. There's no kind of regulation about how accurate that is, right?
Yep.
So you're using an unstructured, unless you build your own private AI stuff, which is coming, and you know what you're doing, but that's effectively just good data science.
Yep. Yeah.
Generative AI, you're asking something to go and form its own opinion and view from the information out there, which ultimately will be done via machine learning techniques, which ultimately means it will be very logical. But it needs the models and it needs the data to support it. And I think a lot of organizations are going, we want Gen AI, but they haven't sorted the data out yet. So a few of the leaders in this space will have already be embarking on data strategy programs, finishing data strategy programs where they've put cloud data analytics platforms in place. They've started to enable data science, machine learning, activated metadata, all this fantastic stuff that Netflix does to tell you what to watch next. Stuff's been going on for ages, good data science. Once you've got that, then you can really start to capitalize on Gen AI stuff with your data. If you haven't got your data sorted at scratch, you're going to have a problem because you can't put any reliability on what the Gen AI output is giving you. Now, there is a bit of a counter argument to this, which you can use machine learning to help fix your data.
Fix your data, yeah.
You can program models to categorize stuff.
Yeah.
Now you can do it without having to have loads of data scientists building stuff. You can automate fixing your data if you know what you're looking at. I think you've really got to understand what value you want from it. And if you don't know, then you need to get some experts in to tell you what value you can get from it. Okay. Because in the insurance industry, there's massive opportunity here, huge, because you can start to understand risk better. You can get risk models you haven't even thought of before to help with the price. You can connect to IoT sensors and devices which are going to feed back information that can be used to generate risk sort of calculations and actuarial. And the insurance industry typically has been a little bit paper-based, especially in general insurance. I think they are coming around to the idea now that they can really get some wins out of this if they use it properly. But again, they need centralized data platforms. They need data lakes. They need to be able to consume that data in a sensible way. And they need people who can, look after it and wrangle it and make sure it's okay. So there's this whole skill set thing there as well. It's not just a data architect, it's data architecture. So it's the whole thing needs to be built properly. And the cloud providers, I work with one hyperscaler on a large company in Germany, and they came in to say, we're going to do your data strategy. And this is a multi-billion-pound company.
Yeah.
They signed a deal for 30 million a year with this hyperscaler. This hyperscaler dropped in a team of 30 people, and every one of them was a cloud architect from the hyperscaler, understood all the tools, that everything that could be achieved through cloud, but had no idea how to translate it to the business problem we were trying to achieve. So they knew the tools inside out, no clue how to use them in the context of that business. And that was quite an eye-opener for me, because they had all the diagrams, they had everything that you go, wow, that's brilliant, you've got all this stuff. And then you go, well, what can you do with it? And they go, well, I don't know, you tell me. Where's the requirement? What we don't really, and that was a real eye-opener for me. So it's quite interesting.
Okay, so other than getting their data in order, what other practical steps can businesses take to separate the hype from reality when trying to deliver an AI strategy?
I think having a good, first of all, untangling the mess of when the CEO comes along and goes, I want AI in my business. You need to understand, well, what actually do you want? What are you trying to achieve through this? That's really important. So defining what the understanding of AI is in your company, absolutely key. What's the definition of AI? Are we talking manual chatbots that the customer can use? Are we talking, features that the call center can use if they get a tricky problem, they need to figure out how to get around it? Are we talking, we want some sort of Gen AI to write us a strategy on how we do this, to gather information? What is your understanding of AI? What you're actually going to do with it? So definition is important. And AI covers a multitude of stuff. It covers chatbots, it covers data science, it covers data analytics, machine learning, on and on and on and on. So there's a whole raft of tools under that. There's a whole raft of approaches. Anything robotics, AI, anything that is kind of making a logical decision is considered AI. So you have to go a little deeper on this. And I think when people talk about AI, what they're actually talking about is machine learning. It just doesn't sound as fun.
Yeah, as sexy, does it? Yeah.
And it costs money, because to be machine learning, there's some great tools out there, especially with some of the cloud providers, to help you build this into your infrastructure and capability. Azure do a fantastic ML sort of whole package. But when you talk to people about what does training a model mean, what are you looking to, there's a lot of misunderstanding in what it is. But machine learning at its simplest form is, you provide some inputs and you provide the outputs you want, and the machine works out how to get there. That's all it is. It produces, the algorithm in the middle. So you've got to have the outputs and you've got to have the inputs, and it will figure out how to get there for you. And then you can keep reusing that. Get optimization. And that's what gives you, it's based on probabilities quite often, or classification. And that's what starts to drive the generative AI transformers, where it goes through layers of, this is a high probability. It's like going down until it gets to a high percentage answer. So machine learning is what I think people want, but they're asking for AI.
Cool. Well, sadly, Phil, we've run out of time. Thanks so much for giving us your time today. It's been a brilliant podcast episode. It's been really interesting to chat around, the detail of setting your stall out early in architecture. Obviously, we've touched on AI a little bit, and we've touched on transformation programs as well. So thanks so much for an excellent podcast episode and for giving us your time today, Phil.
I appreciate that, Mario. Great podcast, and look forward to seeing more.
Thanks, Phil. Have a good day.
Cheers.
And that's a wrap. Sadly, we're at the end of another Transformational Blueprints episode. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed it and there were plenty of golden nuggets for you to take away. If you're a fan of the show, please do remember to share, like, and leave reviews so that more people from our industry get to hear and benefit from these too. Please also follow Synaxia Group on LinkedIn to keep up to date with new episodes. Links in the show notes. Join us next time for another episode packed with tips and advice from senior leaders in the technology world.